Every semester I have a few groups that go out and start up businesses.
But you want to do a tech startup, what would you recommend to that?
Anyone can learn any skill they want, but there's just not time.
Welcome to the Tech Transfer Podcast. I'm Dave Brown, and I'm here with Jeff Jenkins, who is a professor at BYU now, but a few years ago, you were a PhD student at University of Arizona, and that's kind of where entrepreneurship started and led to a recent exit. So what was your PhD work?
So about 12 years ago, I can't believe it's been that long. My PhD work was on using the computer mouse, the keyboard, touchscreen to learn about the person using it. And ultimately, the dissertation was on detecting deception, which eventually moved to fraud when I moved here to BYU.
And I think I've seen some images of your dissertation research. Did you have people choosing between two options? And then
We did.
timing, it was...
So the very early prototypes of this technology was really choosing between two options, or saying that they, in a deception context, they were part of a crime or not. And then they would choose between those options, sometimes telling the truth, sometimes lying, and we would detect if they were lying.
So you would think maybe for like FBI recruiting or something.
Exactly. My dissertation actually went head to head with the polygraph machine.
Okay. And what were the results like? How did it compare?
We did as well as the polygraph machine.
Okay.
Yeah, it definitely showed some promise. More work to do, but showed some promise.
Okay, great. And so that was promising enough that I think you and your professor, and help me pronounce his last
Joe Valicic.
Joe Valicic, the two of you were co-inventors, and I believe at that point the company Neuralink was launched. Is that right?
Yeah. So a NeuroID was launched a little bit after that. It was launched after I came here to BYU, but shortly after that.
Okay, I just said Neuralink. That's Elon Musk's company. Yours is NeuroID.
Neuralink's a good company too, so I wish I had that evaluation.
Yeah. But so you came here and you were still... Sometimes grad students feel like if they do something entrepreneurial, they're getting off the academic track. Not the case for you, because you came here and started your work as a professor here, right?
I did. I came here. I actually took some time to think about, should I pursue this or not? My highest priority was getting tenure here, was being a good teacher and a good researcher and good member of our department. So it definitely took some thought. And I had a few experiences that led me down the route. Yeah, let's go do it.
Yeah. And I don't know if I mentioned this introducing you, but you're in information systems here, which should make sense with this invention.
Yeah.
And I've had, actually, when I've told people about your exit, students have said, oh, he's a great professor. So it's going well, just so you know, anecdotally. Yeah. But so you came here, you did that, but you kept working with Joe, your professor there, and you created another add-on to the technology here. What was that?
Mm-hmm. So it was called FADS, a Fraudulent Application Detection System. And the idea with FADS is it took this deception detection technology and applied it to fraud. Fraud in everyday forms, whether you're applying for a credit card application, applying for a loan online, we can monitor that.
Okay. And so, and the insight, I think, is that a fraudster is going to respond to questions differently than a human would.
Yeah, exactly. And there are different types of fraudsters. There are fraud groups, professional fraudsters, and they respond differently. Family fraud responds differently. And so we monitor behavior at a millisecond precision rate to try to tease out those differences.
So I'm thinking if I were some fraudster and I'm hovering over a question on a form, I already know how I want to answer that, which is different than an actual applicant maybe.
Yeah, and it's interesting because originally we were all about the mouse cursor movements. But if you've applied for a credit card application online, there's a lot of text entry. So as we adapted our technology to this new context, we learned a lot about text entry. So maybe a little less about where they're hovering and how they're entering text.
Okay. And is that the speed or the text?
And so it's all of the above. There are hundreds of different signals we look for. For example, a fraud ring comes in. A fraud ring, they're using stolen credentials. They might be applying for 100 different loans in a day. Right? They may be typing a name like they've never typed it before. They may be copying and pasting a last name and first name into the first name field, then cutting the last name, putting in the last name field. It's just unnatural interactions with the application.
And if you were trying to commit fraud, it would be very difficult to do something like a natural person, right?
It is. It's very difficult on multiple levels. Maybe you can control 2 or 3 things that we're looking for. But when you consider the hundreds of signals we're looking at, it gets very difficult.
Okay. Super interesting technology, and Experian started using it. We'll get to that in a minute. But back when you were launching the company and you're still at University of Arizona or shortly after you left, How did you find a CEO? How did you get hooked up with that?
Good question. So we went through a few CEOs. The person who's the CEO of the company now, Jack Alton, he's been working with us 8 years. He was through a common connection. Joe had a mentor that's helped him out in his life, said, have you talked with Jack Alton? And he's just went through another exit. He's been through a few already. You should talk with him.
Yeah.
He lives up in Whitefish, Montana. So that was one of the contingencies, is our headquarters will be in Whitefish, Montana. It's a beautiful place to have a headquarters.
Mm-hmm. Is that up by Coeur d'Alene? Where's Whitefish?
So right next to Glacier National Park.
Oh, okay. Okay, pretty. So that's great. So that's often how we end up with CEOs, actually. It's kind of word of mouth and someone who's between different successful exits. So that's great. So you found him. And how involved was the University of Arizona's tech transfer office at that point?
And so they were checking in quarterly.
Okay.
Yeah, they checked in to see how things were going, if there are ways they could assist.
Okay. And did you think at that point that, maybe Joe and I will just kind of figure out business and accounting and all this stuff? Or from the start, did you think we'll get someone?
We knew we needed a good business partner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We wanted to keep our professor jobs.
Right.
And I think that's key to being an effective researcher and teacher, in addition to doing the tech transfer stuff. It's finding a good team to work around you.
Yeah, and I think those probably are the two routes. Like there are, as a professor, like you could learn the business things. You could do that.
You could.
But probably not while being a professor.
Yeah, I'm confident anyone can learn any skill they want, but there's just not time to do everything.
Yeah.
And if you try to do it all yourself, well, that's a low ceiling. You're going to hit that pretty quickly, and will affect the ability to grow this.
Right. Completely. So launching the company, finding the right person was important. What were some of the other challenges?
Yeah, I think taking what we had done in the laboratory and turning into a product that companies would actually pay for and use, and it would benefit them. There were a number of pivots along the way, from, first of all, going from deception to fraud, right? And then trying to figure out how to position that. We were the pioneers in detecting fraud from a behavioral perspective. And so we had to convince companies that, hey, this is a type of fraud you should be concerned with. Now every company knows about it. Every company knows they need it.
That's interesting.
But that was a battle.
Yeah, this past decade, it's been hard to convince people that they need good cryptocurrency and these other or cryptography and these other controls, but now they get it right.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, good. And so a lot of researchers, you have this idea, when you're writing your dissertation, you have this idea of what the product is. How hard was it to say, okay, that's not actually what it is, and we're just going to go with the market?
So it's hard to find out what the market wants, right? I think when you are really committed to having something succeed, not just the company, but that our research shows value. And there are so many things you learn along the way. It helps you keep an open mind, and you're eager to learn from industry and apply that to your research. And I think I've learned many, many more times through that process than the early laboratory experiments.
And what do you see as kind of the key differences in mindset between academic research and business?
Say that again?
But what do you see as key differences between academic research mindset and business mindset?
Oh, there are several. Speed to start with.
Oh, yeah.
Academic research papers can take years. If you take years to get a sell, you're out of business.
Right.
Right. And so you have to adjust much faster. And you go beyond just a proof of concept that it works to a proof of value, that it's something that actually has value and makes a difference in the world. And you gather gems of knowledge along the whole way, but it's a different approach.
Well, and academically, if you publish something that turns out to be wrong, that's embarrassing, right? That's to be avoided. Where in business, it's just kind of expected. We're going to make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah. They say fail fast. And I couldn't agree more. You want to fail fast before you spend a lot of time and money, so you can figure out where to go next.
Okay. So you got here, and you were, once you started as a professor, about how much time do you think was going into the company at that point?
It's hard to say, because my research was still this. It has been this for the last decade. And so to say what was research, what was company, is hard to say. I know it was a few busy years, though.
Yeah. And you had talked with us early on, you had talked with me. And when we know that something like this is happening, there's a plan that, okay, this research is going to be done and the technology is going to end up with this company. So you can be doing academic research, and it's very helpful to the company. Right?
It is. And I think my interactions with the company was very helpful for my academic career. It's made my research explode. I'm a
Yeah.
pretty good researcher now.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of success. I've been blessed with a lot of success on the publication side, but I also teach classes in tech entrepreneurship, and they're good classes. I can't imagine how I would know what to teach unless I was in that situation.
Yeah. So two things, they're interesting there. One is, what are some exciting research questions for you now?
Oh, so lots of exciting research questions. I'm doing some research down the authentication space, different mechanisms of authentication. I'm using some of our methods to understand data quality. When someone provides us data or provides a survey response, is it a good response or is it a thoughtless response?
Got it. Okay, good. And then in the classroom, so you're teaching courses that you wouldn't have taught if you
Yeah.
hadn't done this, but also just for any course you teach, how do you approach things differently having gone through business?
So I want results faster. I'm not going, if something's not working right, I'm going to change it within the day. I'm going to really try to stay as relevant as I can with what's going on in industry. So my goal when I teach is everything I teach will be directly useful for them when they go out in industry.
Okay. So let's talk about teaching as kind of an entrepreneurial exercise there for a second. How do you know that something's not working in the classroom?
Yeah, if I'm not having fun teaching it and the students aren't having fun teaching it, then I don't think it's working. And it's not that it's just all fun. I think students have fun when they're intrigued by a subject, when they think they're learning something that is of real value to them and it's addressing real world problems. That's what is fun in an academic setting.
So it's hard in the business setting, it's hard to get information from consumers about what they want and need. In the classroom, how do you know what the students actually want and need?
You gain relationships with them, and it's sort of like your child. You can tell they're not quite satisfied with something. You can tell that pretty well with students too.
I do feel like giving the classroom lecture is a little bit like stand-up comedy where you're kind of feeling the emotion.
It is. You're an entertainer.
So, yeah. Well, good. So there are other researchers who would like to do what you've done, who would like to come up with something useful and then go through the process and get it out there where it can really affect people. What would be your advice for them?
So be prepared. It's going to be work. No doubt it's going to be work if you want to go down this path. So make sure your priorities are straight. What's most important to you as you go down this, or it could be easy to get lost in it. When I was disclosing this to my department head and other leadership, they made it clear you need to be a great teacher and a great researcher.
Yeah.
So those are always top of mind and priority for me. And luckily there was great synergy between being a great teacher and researcher and running this company. They fed each other, and they helped me reach new heights. Second, get a good team. I had an amazing co-founder, Joe Valicic. He's a great friend today. Could not have done this without him. Not only from a technology research perspective, but from an emotional perspective. And I had a great CEO, Jack Alton, and an amazing team around him. The team is what makes or breaks it, I think.
And so then there's kind of your expanded team. Like if you're in a university and you're doing this, what are the other professors' attitudes like, or administrators, whether it's University of Arizona or BYU? Is that, are people cheering for you, or is it kind of an odd thing to do?
And so I think for me, my first priority again was the teaching and research, and they knew that.
Yeah.
And so they didn't give a lot of, honestly, I don't think they gave a lot of thought to it.
Sure. Yeah.
I was completely transparent about what was going on, but I was a teacher and a researcher foremost to them.
Yeah. And I saw you be transparent about it when you were here. And I do always tell people, if you have concerns about conflict of time or anything like that, just disclosure is usually the answer.
You do. Yeah. Every year you fill out the disclosure agreements, and every year I put down my conflict of time.
Yeah. So having been through it, you have, we talk about serial entrepreneurs, people who have done it multiple times. So you've done it one time and it went really well. Well, let's talk about actually where it ended up. So NeuroID started selling their service to Experian at some point.
They did.
Did that happen?
And so we reached out to them. We were working with some of their competitors already. We looked at Experian and thought they would be not only a great customer, but a great partner. Sure. We felt there were a lot of synergies. We really loved their customer base. We loved how we fit in their tech stack. And so there was a natural relationship from a customer-consumer perspective. And we tried to grow that over the years, and that just grew stronger and stronger to the point where we were both ready for an acquisition.
Yeah, and so then Experian went ahead and acquired the company. So they're a good client clearly because they're trying to explicitly trying to prevent financial fraud. But you could also have gone to banks or like any mortgage company. What were the early customers like?
So we had all of the above. We've had customers who are among the largest banks in the world. We had a variety of different types of lenders that went across the whole industry. We were a little bit in the insurance area, but mostly in the fintech area with lending, banks, credit card issuers.
Okay. And are there any direct competitors? Are there other startups out there or companies that are doing the same sort of thing?
There are. There was one that was launched around the same time we were, and they've subsequently been acquired through a private equity firm. And but there's not a lot. There more have come up in the last 5 years. But they were lagging behind a bit from the 10 years we had before that.
Okay. And to the extent you can answer, like if you can't, that's fine. But Experian has acquired NeuroID as of a couple months ago. And you can see how NeuroID provides an important service for them. Is it still meant as a company that's providing services to other companies, or is this going to be like solely an Experian thing?
I don't know the strategy on that exactly. I know that there is benefits both within Experian and outside of Experian. I think together with what they bring to the table and what you bring to the table, it's a really strong combination for all involved.
Yeah, and the CEO, I assume, post acquisition, usually the C-suite people will stay on for a little while. Are you still involved in the company, or?
I'm not. Yeah, so I decided to go the professor route.
Yeah,
and so I'm not involved with the company currently.
Okay, and
so I still love them to death.
Yeah, sure.
Well,
Yeah, no, you got them more than
such a great experience.
So good. And so, yeah, having done it, and it's a big project, 10 years basically, right, from start to finish. Does that seem, do you look back and think, well, we could have gone a couple years faster, or is it just a huge project that takes that long?
Not many companies reach the acquisition stage.
Right.
And so are there things we could have done better? Absolutely. We made mistakes along the way. And some of us were going through this the first time. We had some great experience with us as well. But we made it. We got there.
Yeah.
So although it could have gone faster, we could have done things better. At the end, we made it.
And just to give people a sense of scale, I've seen some numbers like how many transactions have been checked. Do you have any stats like that?
Oh, wow. So years ago when I was recording that, we were up billions upon billions. Yeah. And we got to a point where it wasn't really feasible for us to be monitoring that in the same way. But it's astronomically huge, the amount of data we've collected.
Yeah. You got to the point where, like McDonald's, you stop counting how many burgers.
Exactly. And then data, it goes through a pipeline where it lives so long, then it gets expired as well. So it's not as easy to run a query to collect it.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So 10-year project, and it went really well, and obviously massive scale. So would you do it again, or do you think you'll do another startup company sometime?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I think there are so many lessons that you learn that it seems like a shame not to try to reapply them in some way.
Yeah.
But lightning doesn't always strike in the same place twice. So I really yearn and strive for innovation. And I think I get that through my research. I get that through another startup, but to be determined where it goes in the future.
Yeah. And definitely your expertise that you gained through this is being shared with the students. So you got to feel great about that.
Yeah, I love it.
But like you say, if you and I were starting companies and I was guessing who would succeed, I would guess you. Like, you've done it, And so so there is some value to that. Do you see your students being entrepreneurial, some of them?
Oh, absolutely. So I teach a few different classes, but one of them is called Managing a Tech Startup. And I am teaching students who want to start up companies. And every semester, I've been teaching this, I think, 7 years. Every semester, I have a few groups that go out and start up businesses from this.
Okay.
And I mentor a lot of them for years and years after that.
And are those, so they're tech businesses, are these techs primarily that they've invented themselves, or where do they come from?
Yeah, they're their own ideas in most cases. Things they've had, usually in their last year, their master's program, like, I want to be an entrepreneur. And so they come up with an idea and pursue it.
Okay. And these are going to be information systems, like they're coding, they're creating some software.
Yeah. And so typically each founder group sort of has a tech co-founder and a business co-founder. And so sometimes they're both in information systems, sometimes they're not.
Okay. So when you launched your company, you're at University of Arizona, you were a student, but you were working with a professor. How important was the university setting? Were you guys kind of launching your own company, or were there helps on campus that got you there?
So there were helps on campus. We were foremost concerned with the research, and then we thought, wow, this has commercial value. We used the university time to invent it. That's why we disclosed to both the University of Arizona and BYU. And there were helps along the way. I think there was some seed money along the way that helped us out, get a prototype. And that was super with getting us started.
And was that seed money, was that like university grant funds or?
It was. So the University of Arizona had some seed money for some new startups and allowed us to hire a few contractor programmers to take our research system and turn it into something that was closer to what a customer may want. We had a lot of work to do after that, of course.
Oh, that's interesting. So from the time you disclose the technology and maybe you hire those programmers till you actually have a commercial product that people are paying for, how long did that take?
That is a good question. And this is where it often comes back. Could we have done this better? I think once we had the right team in place, it took us maybe a year to get there. But it took us probably 2 years to get that right team in place.
Okay.
It just didn't happen overnight.
Yeah. No, that's fair. So one thing we're doing, so I do our software licensing here at BYU, and we have a number of software technologies, and I would like to get them closer to market.
Yeah.
So my theory is that we don't have currently grants that we can give people like that. But my theory is that if we get things programmed closer to a professional level, that just commercialization will be easier. So I have, in one case, we have an outside software group that in return for equity, a percentage of the upside, they're creating the commercial ready software code. And I plan to do things like that.
Interesting.
Push them closer. Yeah, I'd be interested in your thoughts though.
Yeah, that I really like that. And the fact that you already have a connection with the software group might actually be more beneficial than the money. Because we had to go find programmers, and some of them we lucked out. Some of them were pretty good, but I imagine that's not always the case.
Oh yeah, I won't name names, but like one startup comes to mind that we launched where they had a programmer, but the programmer just got a better job or whatever, and just kind of flaked out on them, and that just left them with some software code they couldn't do a lot with.
I would be curious to know once they develop that prototype, how that gets transitioned to a team that's maintaining it.
Yeah,
and actually getting it to market.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the code can't just sit there like there. You need support beyond that. But yeah, that's what we're working on. So, well, good. So, let's see. Final advice for any students. We hope that student entrepreneurs are listening to this. If you're starting, and what if you're not a tech person, you're not doing research, but you want to do a tech startup? What would you recommend to them?
And so everyone has inadequate skills to do this out of the gate. I've never met an entrepreneur that's been like, I've never personally met an entrepreneur who's been like, I have the perfect skill set for this. So this is a PhD in entrepreneurship. Yeah, by going out there and learning and trying things and having failures and successes, you're going to learn a lot. And I see the students that I've taught over the years, a lot of them have gone out and started companies. And honestly, a lot of them didn't have the skills that it required at that point to be successful, but come back to them a year later and they're outstanding.
Yeah.
And I tell this to my students, and especially the ones who are struggling through a startup. I said, I spent 4 years getting a PhD. You're spending these years furthering your education too. Yeah. And oh boy, do they become so good at what they're doing.
Yeah. And it is kind of a matter
of class.
Yeah, because I've been here long enough now, doing this for 14 years, essentially, where the students from when I started have all gone and done things at this point. And so one of them recently sold his company for over $1 billion. And 10 years ago, he looked like all the other ones. Yeah. Right. But he was just out there doing it.
Exactly. I don't know if there's a better way to really push yourself and grow than putting yourself through this.
When do you think is I always tell people that college is the least risky time to start a startup, but you were a little post-college. You were married, I think, at the time.
I was married, had a few kids, had 3 more during that time. I still think college is a great time to do it. And it's not just about the risk. I think there's ways to mitigate the risk, but there is a certain energy level. And I'm considering this now as I'm thinking about other startups that are right in front of me. I don't even have to come up with the ideas per se, but I don't have the same energy level I had when I was 26.
Yeah.
Right. Or 30 when I came here.
Yeah.
And it requires a lot of energy. So I think from a physical standpoint, just being able to do it and a risk perspective, there's never a better time.
Yeah, and going forward, I could see you being on boards of directors for student startups and things like
Yeah.
this.
And I love mentoring student startups. I'm mentoring a handful right now.
Mhm.
I've invested in some of them. It's really great to watch them and answer questions, get together on a monthly or quarterly basis and talk through their problems and say, I've been there.
Yeah.
Here's some options.
Yeah. Okay. Terrific. Well, great. Well, Jeff, congratulations. That was fantastic. We were so happy when we were getting close and it became clear the company was going to exit. So happy for you. You worked on this and deserve it like crazy. So thanks so much for talking to us about it.
Thank you. Glad we made it.